it beat me down. I mean, I would cry all the time. I ended up using humor, like becoming the class clown, to kind of deflect and dissociate and deal with it and have some kind of connection, because it was brutal. And that led into all the disordered eating.
I wonder why kids are so brutal. Your story brought me back to my middle school. We had also a very tall, quite a bigger guy in school. I remember a lot of the guys would make fun of him, and him being kind of like closed down. And it just like your story just brought me back to that moment, seeing him and the intimidation, the kind of like the tension that he would walk into school or any social setting. So how can one even make friends if you feel like, oh, any potential new person is going to make fun of me and just see me for my body, not for who I am. They don't really care who's on the inside.
Exactly. And, you know, when you're rejected by the guys because you're not alpha male enough, you're not an athlete, you're not cool, and then rejected by the women because you're not attractive to them. And then even like when it was okay for like when I was coming up for teachers to even like join, like it's horrifying now, but like, you know, I would get made fun of by teachers. I remember one French teacher would make fun of me all the time. And yeah, those are the things I was dealing with. So like I had a very poor self-image, and I was already shaken in terms of my identity from my childhood and years of abuse. So I ended up becoming depressed, suicidal, again, disordered eating, body dysmorphia, and then that led into a lot of autoimmune issues because I just hated my body and I was doing abusive things to myself, gaslighting myself
just to
about
feel
how disgusting
right?
I was. Like I was telling myself that all the time, that you're not good enough, you're disgusting. You know, I literally dreamed of taking like knives or cleavers and like cutting fat, hacking fat off my body because I just hated my body.
Well,
yeah.
I have this theory that we store fat because we don't feel safe.
Yeah.
It's our like safety suit.
Totally.
And the more unsafe you feel in this world, when you go around and every single person is just a threat, you're going to put on more weight. I have goosebumps saying this because I really feel like it's such a catch-22 because you will never lose weight if you're imagining yourself with a knife cutting it off. Like,
agreed. That's why, like, you know, all this biohacking and supplementation and paleo and keto, all the things I did were amazing steps along the process, but probably the most profound one for me was when I did my first psychedelic journey and learned to literally love myself for the first time.
You just touched on so many things. Number one, I feel like nothing makes sense. No biohacking in the world, no losing weight, if you're doing it from a place of hate, right? Like even supplements. If you take a supplement, you're like, oh, metabolism booster because I'm so fat and like terrible. Or you can take that and like, let me support my body. It's doing so much for me. That's going to be just like a little boost for me to feel better, right? Two different energies to go behind. And if you don't truly love yourself, it doesn't matter if you're going to be 120 pounds with your height or I'm going to be 80. It's never going to be good enough. And I'm sure you can tell that you losing all that weight didn't make you happy because it's not about the weight.
Exactly. And this is where, you know, originally biohacking was kind of ultra masculinized, you know, the Ben Green, no offense, like Ben Greenfield to these guys because they're my friends, but Ben Greenfield, Dave Asprey, you know, Tim Ferriss, whoever, like all these guys are like trying to do the most extreme things and like, I'm
pulling
gonna
a muscle, right? Like Tim Ferriss had this like TED talk where I'm like, oh, this is where I'm pulling my muscle.
Yeah. And injecting urine. And it's like, what is that? Like the more crazy it gets, like the more like masculine and cool and biohacking and extreme it is. Like who's the most extreme and like who's injecting the most needles, taking the most pills. And there is stuff to be learned out of that. That's the kind of new technology that we should employ, we should understand. But there's also like going back into self-care and ancient wisdom. And the feminine is now coming into health optimization, or if you want to call it biohacking, where we're now looking at sun gazing and forest bathing and journaling and breath work and, you know, plunges and, you know, all these different things that we're doing, like intimacy. I mean, intimacy, like how important is that? Not just, you know, sex, and like guys tend to think of sex as like performance and like, I got to knock it out.
Yeah.
I could get kind of graphic here, but it's like, you know, it's like we're rating ourselves. And this is like the biohacking thing. Like, what's your score? Like, how much money do you make? How big is your penis? Like, what kind of car do you drive? Like, it's like everything's a metric.
Yeah.
And like, we don't take a step back and like, are you enjoying your life? Like, are you connecting with this other person? Are you connected to yourself? Do you love yourself? So for me, that's where I was my whole life, was just on these metrics and gaslighting myself if I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And I love that, you know, through this path of psychedelics, that I finally learned to love myself for the first time. It was like, it may sound like if I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm going to say like, hey, you should love yourself, you're going to say, yep.
Yeah, I heard that before.
Yeah, and I'd be like, okay, like, right. Like, that makes sense, but it's a whole different thing when you anchor it